I will call this meeting of the East Gloucester Veterans School Building Committee to order. And this meeting is recorded by video and audio in accordance with the state open meeting law, consistent with the governor's orders suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and banning gatherings of more than 10 people. This meeting will be conducted by remote participation. And we need to start, Chris, with a roll call for attendance, if you could do that.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Jonathan Pope,
Here.
Richard Sapphire, not in attendance. Jason Rogers, not in attendance. Peter Martori,
Here.
thank you. Kathleen Clancy.
Here.
Donna Compton.
Yes.
Thank you. John Dunn.
Here.
Thank you. Gary Frisch.
Here.
Thank you. Matthew Fusco.
Here.
Thank you. Grant Harris. Not in attendance.
No, he's here. He's just not logged on video or audio.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you for catching that.
We'll circle back. He needs to verbalize it.
Okay, I'll
Go ahead.
go back. Joe Lucio.
Present.
Thank you. Ryan Marks. Not in attendance. And Amy Pasquarello.
I'm here.
Thank you.
Yeah. And circle back. I think
And
Richard
Grant.
Sapphire's on here.
Richard Sapphire.
I am present.
Thank you. And Grant Harris. Grant, you're on mute.
I'll text him.
I think he's doubled up on 2 meetings, so
Okay.
at the same time.
Do you wish to go ahead, Jonathan, with the get the meeting going?
Oh, okay. I was getting it going, but I was muted.
Oh.
I was halfway through it. We were almost done. The first order of business is to approve the minutes of the East Gloucester Veterans Project meeting of May 19th, 2020. Are there any is there any corrections or omissions? And seeing none, do we have an a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Seconded.
Okay. And Chris, we need a roll call vote. Sorry. You're muted.
Yeah, I did it to myself. Thank you.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, Jonathan Pope,
Yes. Hi. Yes.
Richard Sapphire,
Yes.
Greg Catamartori,
Yes.
Kathleen Clancy,
Yes.
Donna Compton,
Yes.
John Dunn,
Yes.
Gary Frisch,
Yes.
Matt Fusco,
Yes.
Grant Harris.
Yes.
Fix the spelling.
That's good.
All right. Joe Lucido
Yes.
and Amy Pasquarello.
Yes.
Okay. It carries unanimously. Do we want Jonathan Rich and Alex Corbett and Tom Hood are here from WT Rich. Do we want to introduce them now, Tom?
Well, the only thing I want to do is if we wanted to just quickly go through and approve the invoice and get that
Okay.
out of the way. for,
Okay, then we'll take up, okay, I see you have it on the agenda. Okay.
yeah, so
didn't-
let me,
I didn't want him sitting around through all day waiting.
Well, this should be
Okay, so
very
the first order of deliberations is to review the approval of the project invoices, and I believe we just have the one from Doran Whittier. Whoops, oh, there it is.
okay.
Okay,
So basically, it's current amount for this month, 55,140.80,
okay, and
invoice number 17.
so is there any, this is just a progress payment, there's no new,
Right, no additional services. And
there's
for the
no
month of May.
new billing. Okay, do we have a motion to pay this invoice?
So moved.
Second.
Okay,
Who was the second?
is
on
there
that?
any questions or discussion?
Who was the second, please?
It was Rich.
Rich, okay, thank you.
Is there any discussion? I can't see everybody here. So you'll have to speak up if you, I can't see you if you're waving your hand. So if you want to say something, you have to speak up. Seeing none, Chris, I guess another roll call vote.
Okay. Jonathan Pope,
Yes.
Richard Sapphire,
Yes.
Nick Catamortori,
Yes.
Kathleen Clancy,
Yes.
Donna Compton,
Yes.
John Dunn,
Yes.
Gary Frisch,
Yes.
Matt Fusco,
Yes.
Grant Harris.
Yes.
Thank you. Joe Lucido,
Yes.
Amy Pasquarello.
Yes.
Thank you.
It carries unanimously, and we will
Okay.
pay that invoice.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the last item, just to quickly, again, it leads into the next conversation, if that's okay.
Okay.
And I guess the WT Rich Group, are they in a waiting room, or are they signed in here?
They're in attendance. They are not signed in as panelists.
Ooh, okay.
I believe we can.
I can promote them so who am I promoting?
John Rich.
Alex Corbett
You're right.
and Dawn Hood.
Tom Hood?
Tom,
Is-
Okay.
correct.
Can I interrupt real quick? Jason is as a attendee. Greg, can you promote him to a panelist and bring him in?
Right.
I can.
Thank you.
All right. So-
Okay. We are. Tom, you want to go through the
Okay, sure.
update of the schedule because.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, we'll do this, and this kind of gets us through the end of the MSBA SD package submission. We are here on the 11th, right there. And we're planning to have a meeting next week, which will review the contents of the SD package scope, so that if there is any questions, basically what's different from the PSR submission in terms of scope and what will be presented to the MSBA. The end of next week, we'll have a working group meeting to review the total project budget, which will be incorporated into the SD package. Then the plan is to have a meeting, school building committee meeting on the Tuesday, the 23rd, to make the final approval of the SD package and approve the OPM to submit that to the MSBA. Then the next day, there will be a school committee meeting where they will ratify the submission approval of the school building committee so that can be formalized. And then the following day, we will submit the 4C budget, which is the Form 3011, to the MSBA in advance of the submission package, which is due on the 8th. And then Doran Whittier will be compiling all the documents and turn them over to us on or about the 1st of July. We'll be reviewing them and then providing the electronic cover letter and then submitting them to the MSBA on or before July 8th. Then we will be prepared for the MSBA board meeting, which is on August 26th. And then approximately a week before that, we will have a project scope and budget conference with the MSBA after they've had a chance to review the package that was submitted. So that's it. I don't know if there's any questions.
Any questions? Once again, I can't see you, so you basically have to speak up.
Okay. All right. Well, so I think that takes care of most of the administrative items here, and that gets into the introduction of
Okay.
the Deputy Rich team. So go ahead, Jonathan.
Okay, we, as you know, at our last meeting, we discussed that the search committee had put forward the W.T. Rich construction company to be our contracted managers at risk, and they have accepted and I believe come to terms on the contract, and they are here. Mr. Rich, would you like to introduce your team? And this is the building committee that you'll be dealing with.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jonathan. Good to see you again. First off, I think I just want to say on behalf of W.T. Rich, we're thrilled to have been selected. I like that you said that we accepted your offer, Jonathan. So yes, we definitely accepted that offer to be your construction manager. So we're really excited about this project. I hope you could tell with the proposal process. We put a lot of effort into the understanding the project, understanding the subtleties, and developing our approach accordingly. We're going to be very hands-on and involved throughout. We've already kind of got really very much hit the ground running. We had already done an estimate at the RFP stage. We did sort of a final update on that based on a little bit of additional information, and we did our reconciliation. Tom's going to get into all that details, but we did quite a few things there. So we're excited. We're excited to be working with all of you. Introduce my team. I'm going to start with Alex Corbett, who you guys already know very well, and at least some of you do. So Alex, you want to say hello and say a few words?
Hi, everybody. Good to see you all again. I'm pretty happy to be back, if you can imagine. Different role this time, obviously, but I'm really looking forward to being here again with you guys.
Alex, would you like us to bring Talina back?
Yeah, please. I hear you're leaving. I'm very sad to hear that, but
Well, thank you. That's gracious. Appreciate it.
Nice to see you, Alex.
you too, Kathy.
Thanks.
For everybody else, I think I know most of you, maybe a few I new faces, but looking forward to meeting you guys.
I'm looking forward to working with you again, Alex.
Who was that, Grant?
Grant.
Yes,
I
it is.
missed you. I missed you, Grant. I know you missed me too.
Okay.
So poor Tom he doesn't know anyone, right? Tom, but you gotta introduce yourself anyway. So please say a few words, Tom.
Oh, he's muted. Bad
He's muted.
start.
Tom, we can't hear you. You don't have them.
Doesn't look like his mic's muted here on our end, but anyway, he's high.
All right. Technical problems. We're just, I'll just say Tom's a great guy. You guys are going to love him. So
Okay.
maybe a little bit technologically challenged. Sorry, Tom, that's not fair. That's not fair.
Yeah.
We all run into those problems. But,
How was he in a game of charades, by the way?
yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to
That's
see.
right.
But
So,
anyway, anyways, we're super excited and really, eager to jump in the process, help out any way we can. And we've already been getting engaged. So that's great. So, I guess Jonathan or Tom will flip it back to you guys so you can
Okay, well,
keep rolling on the agenda.
welcome aboard, and we're glad to have you. And we've got our work cut out for us for the next couple of weeks, and then it'll be a lot of waiting, I think, right?
Anyway, okay. Well, what I'd like to do is, we've kind of concluded the cost estimate phase for the SD submission package. I think Jonathan alluded to the fact that they had done a cost estimate that was part of the original SD phase work for the CMR firm, is to do that. Also to look at the schedule and logistics, which they've done. So what I'd like to do is kind of walk through the process of the construction costs. We're just going to focus on just the construction costs tonight, and then the FF&E technology at the end of the meeting. But to, as part of the SD package, we'll be submitting to the MSBA. I just wanted to draw the line back to the preferred schematic report cost estimate that we had, just as a milestone to show, where we were back then and where we are now and how we got there. So what I'd like to do is share my screen if I could, Jonathan, and let me see. I got to exit full screen mode, and okay, can you see that?
No, Tom.
Okay.
Now we can see it.
Okay, let's pull down. You see this? Okay. Can you see the budget overview sheet?
Yes.
Okay, so this sheet was taken out of the PSR, which was part of the budget overview, which was described, the overall project and estimated project cost. And in that, the estimate that was done by Doran Whittier and PM&C was this number, $54,127,365. Okay, so that's the starting point of the cost estimate transition as we go. So if we go to the next phase, which was the side-by-side comparison of all three estimates, this is what we've been working on the last couple of weeks. So let me see if I can go up here a little bit and get rid of the header here. But at the end of the day, there were three separate estimates that were performed. And the first column is the W.T. Rich SD estimate. The second column was the PMC Doran Whittier estimate. And the third column was the CBRE Heary SD cost estimate. And at to kind of summarize this table is the base building direct cost of the work consisted of four parts, which is the building construction, the demolition, the hazmat removal, and then site work. So I think the most important piece of this, which is I think we were pretty close to each other doing three totally independent cost estimates, is to look at the total direct cost of the work, which is Rich is at $40,246,000, PM&C was $40,225,000, and ours was at $40,669,000. So as you can see, the range from high to low was within about 420,000, which is at about 1%. So actually, to be honest with you, that's a pretty good tight spread between the three independent estimates. So what this table did, this was prepared by Rich, their office, was that a number of the assumptions that were made in the estimating process. There's estimates and there's contingencies. So we'll be talking about that as part of the assumptions that are being made relative to the construction cost. The set of drawings that were completed by Doran Whittier were really very good, very complete, and went what we would think, and our cost estimators had even said this, that they went beyond what they would normally expect to see at an SD phase. So that gives us a lot of information and a lot of detail at this stage of the game that normally wouldn't be there. Sometimes this design and estimating contingency can be 15 or 20% depending upon how much information is available at the time. So this is a pretty good tight set of drawings. So the contingency at this point, and this is for things that are not in the drawings or detailed yet in substantially, and that toward the end of the DD phase, everything will be in the drawings in one form, shape, or other, whether it's drawings, one-line diagrams, or narratives. The one difference that happens, and these are all 10% of these numbers up here, the direct cost. Our cost estimators use a little different process. They take their design contingencies actually off the bottom number. So this number here of 4.688 is more than 10% of the direct cost number, but it's the way our cost estimators put that in there. So keeping their formulas intact, and it is a 10% markup, but it's a 10% markup on a larger number at the end that includes the overhead and profit piece. So that's why that number is a little higher than the other ones. And the reason I kept that is because the backup for all these estimates have those numbers embedded in them. So to start changing them at this point can be somewhat confusing based upon the backup, but I just don't want anyone to believe that, and John Dunn picked this up in our preliminary review of this, that 10% was not 10% of that number. Same thing for the escalation. Our number is a little bit higher based upon a little bit different number. Now, the next point is the escalation that has been assumed from today's date through to the midpoint of construction. And at this stage, W.T. Rich has prepared, and we're updating our schedule to show a substantial completion in April, at the end of April of 2023. So, which is earlier than we had, which was going to be, in and about June, end of June. So what we've done, this escalation is midpoint to that time period, and it's 4.5%. And we've kind of agreed that, again, this is a crystal ball, and we're not quite sure, what the future is going to hold with the coronavirus impact and the economic impact and everything else. So, if you want to be really, really conservative, you can throw a lot of escalation on it, but that doesn't help your project budget. All it does is increase it. And it is a risk management issue. So I think collectively between W.T. Rich and the cost estimators, what the industry is projecting at this point, that seemed to be a somewhat reasonable escalation rate at this point. So we can get into that conversation a little bit later if we want to. But then what we also did too was we kept our general conditions in numbers and the way these were calculated. And then also, since now we've got a lump sum fee from Rich, we use the same fee across the board. And then the same thing with the contingencies. We're at 1.5%. Our number was calculated slightly on a different number, as you can see. And then they adjusted a credit for their bonds and insurance, which was not included in the original number. So at the end of the day, the PMC number and the W.T. Rich number was pretty close in the end. Ours was a little higher, but as you can see why it was higher, but it also too just reflected about a 1% increase in the direct cost of the work. So as estimations go, estimating projects, I think this is a pretty tight number. So I think it was collectively decided, why we brought WT Rich on board before the completion of the SD phase was to get them to prepare an estimate, opine on the cost and the schedule, which they have done. So we are going to recommend that we use the WT Rich estimate for budgeting purposes, for establishing the budget moving forward. And I think, Jonathan and his team can talk a little bit about their confidence level in the numbers that we have at this point. So I don't know, Jonathan, if maybe you or Brad want to comment here on kind of your assessment of the cost estimating process and kind of how we landed with this summary.
Yeah, I'll talk about the estimate, and then Brad, I'm sure you'll have some things to add. But schematic design is pretty early in the design process, so there's a lot of things that are still conceptual in nature. I think we pride ourselves on being able to kind of look at those things and figure out what the construction is going to be and what's not yet shown but needs to be accounted for. This is one of the tightest spreads we've had with in terms of the other estimators. I mean, CBRE is a little bit higher if you just look at the direct cost of work, but we're only 21,000 away from PM&C. So that gave us a lot of confidence. When we go through the reconciliation, we didn't actually have to spend a lot of time getting closer because we started off pretty close, but we just wanted to make sure we had all the work covered. Sometimes we added a little bit, took away some. So pretty high confidence in that. The other thing always is these contingencies, the 10% and the 4.5%. 10% I think is a very good number for this stage where we're at and the quality of the SDs, as Tom said. And the 4.5%, the escalation is a little bit tricky. There's a lot of debate over whether you escalate to the start of the bidding period or to the midpoint of the project. But we felt like this number was pretty good. There actually seems to be, a buyer's market right now on jobs that are coming out for bid because of the coronavirus and the state of the economy overall. I don't think we're poised for a period of higher than normal escalation, and it's a little bit too early to be overly optimistic. So I think we have the number. I think we have it about right, and there's a chance we could beat that escalation quite a bit too. We have a couple jobs coming out for bid the end of June, and we're going to know a lot more from our own experience on those two projects. But I think we're feeling really good about what we have, how we have it covered right now.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo what John says. I think the estimates are all very tight, which is good, because that means everybody's looking at the same thing. And I think that's important from a estimating perspective. I think at this point, when at schematic design, while it is pretty early, and I think, thank you, Tom, for, kind of the compliment on the drawing levels. I think they are pretty good for this stage. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be the opportunity, right, to look at potential value engineering options as we move forward in design. But right now, what we've done, right, is we've taken the scope that everybody has looked at, both from a programmatic perspective, kind of from a site perspective, and from a kind of design perspective. And that's what's reflected in the drawings. And so when we look at these types of things, right, this is what the cost yields. And I think that, we can look at things as we move forward as potential, VE options to reduce the cost, because we know that everybody's cost sensitive about these things. But I think it's important to do that, with our eyes wide open and understanding, right, what all of those things are. So, kind of as part of the process, you go through this and you say, where might be some options that we might be able to save some money. And so we look at those, and honestly, I think that there probably are some things, depending on what type of compromises down the road you may or may not decide to take. But I think it's important when you go into a job, right, that you go into a job comfortable with the number that you have and comfortable with the scope that you have. And I think right now we're at that point. And I think, you know, what you don't want to have, and I feel that we're not in that position right now, is going into a job where you go and say, we have to go and, you know, take $5 million out of this job, and we're just going to take $5 million out and then go meet it. Because you never know what you're going to end up with. And so right now, I think the approach that we should take, and we're currently taking, is, you know, we have a number that's representative of the scope. We, as the project team, are going to develop a number of potential, you know, VE options that we have to go and provide to MSBA. And as the design process evolves, we'll continue to go and evaluate those, and then bring those back to the committee. And then based on the committee's direction, determine, you know, if we want to implement those things or if we don't. Because, you know, that's part of the MSBA process. And I think it's an important distinction between going and saying, okay, we have these VE options that might be out there that haven't been fully vetted yet. Let's go and put a number on those today, right? Put that into the 3011, and then, you know, hope that all of that stuff just materializes. I think that's a recipe, you know, for disaster down the road. So I think, you know, the estimate is reasonable. I think there's actually probably some conservative elements, but I think at this point in the job, this is where you want to be.
Kathy has a question.
Yes, I have a couple questions, mostly for Jonathan Rich. In terms of your estimate of cost per square foot coming in around $579 per square foot, is that what you've been seeing in your projects as, you know, average cost?
That's on the high side. We talked about this with a little bit of the team. That's on the high side for an elementary school. I would say more typical is, you know, 530 to 550. But then again, you got to factor in the escalation. So it's a little bit on the high side. You know, if you wanted to start squeezing things now, I think this is what Brad was also alluding to. That there's an opportunity to squeeze it now, but I think Brad is saying, well, maybe it's a little bit better to be a little bit comfortable now, and then if we run into some challenges later, then we can start to make those tough decisions. So I would say it's a little bit on the higher side right now for an elementary school.
Yeah, I agree with that, Kathy. But if you look at, you know, if you map this out kind of on the MSBA website, and you look at where 578 kind of shakes out, you know, where the trend line is, because there's only one project, which is us right now, which was represented at 612, which is a little high in the box. But when you bring it down to 578, if you were to go and project that curve, we're pretty close to being on that target.
Okay, I just want to say that, you know, it's a sensitive time to be putting numbers out there. November will be here before we know it. So I just think we need to be as tight as we possibly can be, given what we know at this time. My second question had to do with the building gross square foot, where W.T. Rich has it at 92,000, and the other ones are closer to 90,000, because that's, you know, indicative. That's like $1.1 million difference between 90 and 92. You know, 2,000 square feet.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, maybe I'll jump in here a little bit. Michelle and I had a long conversation about this. These cost estimates were based upon actual takeoffs of all the drawings, and you know, like our number is in sometimes it's the way you calculate gross square footage. Some of them can be, you can take out the shafts, you can take out pieces of it, and you, according to BOMA standards, sometimes these numbers a little bit differently. So there's a program number which we have, which is 90,002, which is what PMC's numbers. But the bottom line is the total number of the project. The actual square footage of the gross out-to-out building is just slightly under 92,000 right now. Our number 9560 is adjusted for taking out shafts and some other pieces on it. So I wouldn't get distracted by saying, just by changing the square footage number, we're going to save money, because actually the cost was taken right off the drawing. So that's that cost is what's there. The square footage is just how you calculate, you know, at this point, what that number is. It's a resultant of that. So,
Right, but my point is if that square footage is higher,
Mhm.
then it brings down your cost per square foot. So if the average square foot is closer to 90, then our cost per square foot is higher than 578. And therefore
Right,
we would
right.
continue to be an outlier.
right. And
I think it's important that you look at the bottom number, the top numbers, the buildings that were estimated by WT Rich as well as PMNC are the same exact buildings. The reporting of the square footage is different, and you can see that the cost estimates are so close. So they're not giving a square foot number, cost per square foot number to this estimate. So even if we went back and took out, if we changed those numbers, it wouldn't change the cost at the bottom. It would just change PMNC's cost per square foot to be closer to what WT Rich's is, or what's.
Right.
I understand, Michelle. Thank you.
So Kathy, just to let you know, we have already started the conversation with the MSBA on normalizing the square footages, because I specifically asked them to tell me how they calculate things, because if every project, as you can see, we're looking at the same set of drawings and there's different ways of looking at how you do square footages. I've asked for that interpretation. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get a response from them because they're preparing for their board meeting later this month. However, again, it is the bottom line cost, but I want to be sure when we report the cost per square foot as it relates to the other schools that they're using, we're using the same method so that we're not inadvertently creating to be more of an outlier than we are, or at some point just based upon the way we're taking it. So that was a question I had when we first came up, and we're in the process of working that through with the MSBA so that at the end of the day, our cost divided by the gross square footage method that they determine will be the same as the other school projects. So that's really.
And I can tell you for a fact, right? Because we've had some of these discussions ourselves with them and with other designers, right? Those numbers that are on those websites are not necessarily indicative of like a true kind of square footage.
Right.
The most important, while I understand, the importance of metrics, right? The most important thing, right, in terms of where the rubber's going to hit the road for the city is going to be what that dollars number is. And that dollars number, right, even between all three estimates, I mean, is tight. And, that's really from an estimating perspective and feeling comfortable that, we've estimated the project correctly is the important factor.
Mm-hmm. So.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got John Dunn here. I've got one comment. Brad, it does matter what the square footage is, because unless I'm missing something, that MSBA reimbursement is based on square footage. So, we need to know what that is. If in fact we're thinking that the building is 92,000, but it's only 90, then we do need to kind of wrestle that down.
So that's good. That's a good point. So there's really kind of two things that are happening here, right? There's the program square footage, which MSBA is going to base their reimbursement on, right? And the program square footage, I think, is 90,002, right?
That's
right now,
times the grossing factor, right?
Pardon?
That's a program space square footage times the grossing factor, which is what they're saying. Educationally, that's what they'll reimburse, correct?
I think 90,002 right now includes the grossed up number. So that's the gross number. So right now, if you went in and we took this off on Revit on our CAD machine, right? Our number is 90,664 square feet, I believe. So we know during the design phase, in order to get it to the MSBA reimbursable amount, we need to get the program in our CAD to 90,002, right? We're pretty comfortable about doing that as design evolves. That aside for the moment, right? That's what MSBA is going to reimburse. how John and other CMs are going to take this off, right? And, how bidders are going to take it off is represented by, kind of what their number is. So MSBA is going to reimburse based on kind of a strict program element, and they're going to reimburse based on that. And then they're going to pay a dollars per square foot number, which is right now $33 a square foot. So,
Yeah, that's a cap.
there's different parts that are going to be moving, but at the end of the day, the MSBA number will be locked down by the square footage, regardless of what any one of these two things say up here for, kind of how an estimator is going to look at it.
Agreed. And I just want to make, we need to start focusing, down. And I know that, as we proceed along, we will with the 3011. But we need to be able to put the question and formulate the question for the November vote by early in August. So again, it would be nice to be able to kind of, nail all these things down so that we're not, waffling back and forth as to what our answers may be.
So we'll know what, and I think Tom can address this, right? So when we go through, this is like the precursor to go and setting up the discussion on the 3011, which will happen before the MSBA board vote, right? That we will go and know, right, what that, reimbursable amount is going to be from them based on square footage and any type of other, eligible and ineligible costs based on the total project cost that we submit to them. So we'll know that in advance of what ends up happening in November.
Great.
All right, good, thanks.
Any other questions? I don't see any, Tom. Do you want to move on?
Okay, we'll do one more sheet because I did the there we go. Okay, so this is the last piece to kind of connect the dots from the PSR estimate. This is the PSR estimate that got us to the 54,127 number I referred you to at the beginning, which was in the budget, which was at 607 a square foot based upon this number. I did two things. One is to adjust the this PSR estimate by taking out the demolition and hazmat for the East Gloucester School project, so that we're focusing on what's going to be in the MSBA SD package. And so this time, as you can see, we zeroed those out. And so what that did is, based upon just recalculating this, that would have driven, again, goes back to cost per square foot, because it took out a lot of costs without changing anything about the program. And at that time, it was 89,036. And what we've done since then is we've actually added program square footage to the project to push up that square footage, which was program space that was discussed, I think, primarily in the February school building committee, where it had to do with increasing the gym size for a greater audience space, as well as there were some educational spaces that were added in concurrence, knowing that the project would be, it would increase the square footage, and it was also relative to the cost would be increased. So as you can see, the amount of the cost at the total cost at that point was 52,672 with the escalation that was provided, which was again 12% design and pricing contingency and 8%
Are you assuming we're looking at something?
Yes.
Because we're not.
Oh, well, I'm sitting here. Okay, let me see. So it says share. Let's see.
Here we go.
Can you see my, now can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. I apologize. My fault. So again, I'll quickly recap this. This is the PSR estimate number that was in the last submission. This is the East Gloucester removal of the demo and abatement. As you can see, there's 0 here where these 2 line items existed previously. So by doing that, running the same formulas down, keeping the same escalation rate, the PSR estimate without the East Gloucester site cost would have been 52.6 or 591 a square foot at that point. But again, the relevant number is the 52.6. Now, throwing in here in the next column, the WT Rich SD cost estimate, you can see that there are areas where costs have gone up, site cost. There's some building costs, obviously, because of the extra program space that's there. I did a quick calculation, and when you escalate this 8% and this one 4.5%, you're within like $5 a square foot. So the relative cost on an escalated basis of these 2 projects is about the same. So again, a little bit larger square footage. So at the end of the day, what this does is, again, this is the rich number, which is 53,236 compared to 52,234 with a different scope of work. So what's different between this, and I think Michelle and I've reviewed most of that, is the gym and the other program space. You can see there's probably $600,000 in site work that that's about that, which as the site development occurred, more costs were specifically defined in that. So so that's kind of the overview of just kind of drawing, connecting the dots between the PSR number that was published and where we're landing right now, which puts us at about the 578 cost per square foot on a true gross square footage outside of building to outside of building with no deductions. And if that's where we land, that's where MSBA has told us to kind of move forward at this point for our calculation purposes with them. So, okay.
Okay, any questions?
Okay, so the last item, and I think Brad started to allude to this, was to have a general discussion with the committee on potential value management, value engineering options, which need to be included in the SD submission. So I don't know, Michelle, if you want to quickly go through some of the ones that we've discussed in general. I think we probably have talked about them in some way, shape, or form as the design has evolved, as material selections have been made. There have been conversations. We could do A, B, or C. This is what we're going to go with, but there are other options that are available. So I'll let Brad and Michelle kind of start this initial discussion.
I think, so for the schematic design, we're required to put together a list of things that we're considering, but at this point in time, we're not required to make any decisions based on that list. And, the next step for us would be to decide what is it that we want to keep on the table, what is it that we don't want to touch, and then to go and have a cost estimate and determine whether or not the value of making those changes makes sense to us. So an example of that would be, we understand that, not putting in a turf field would cost less money, but it would also really compromise the ability to use that field for that number of children. So having a turf field is probably not something you want to have on the table as a consideration. We've come up with a short list at this point, and there's other items that we can begin to look at as we move forward. But when we submit the schematic design, we are essentially looking at things like replacing concrete sidewalks with sidewalks that are not on the property. So that's where we're making improvements off-site to some of the sidewalks and some of the curbing. And those are certainly some of the issues that the city will want to weigh in on. We'll want to talk about other outside areas where we have bollards. Maybe you replace those with boulders as a way of managing traffic and protecting areas rather than having actual bollards. We might look at different size brick on the building. If you increase the brick, you might be able to reduce the cost of those kinds of things. The amount of curtain wall, the amount of roof edge, metal roof edge that we're looking at. Inside, we're looking at different materials like the terrazzo floor versus a tile. And some of the wood ceilings, rather than using actual wood, we might find another product that gives us the same kind of acoustical values and has the same look and feel, but might come in cheaper or for less money, I'm sorry. So that's the list that we're putting together. We'll have a more comprehensive list for you for the next time we meet. Again, none of these things have to be decided at this point in time, but it is the list that we're going to be coming back to you in the DD process and saying, do you want to keep this? Do you want to evaluate the cost of the products that we're looking at?
Right.
Just so everybody understands, MSBA requires that we have a list of things that if we have to reduce the cost, these are the things that we can look at. None of them would include changing the design or the function of the building. They're right, Michelle, they're really all just materials, pretty much.
That's correct. Our goal here is not to change any of the program spaces or any of the quality of the building. So, you know, it's first cost versus the long-term quality of the products that we would be weighing against each other.
Any questions? Kathy?
Michelle, do we still have in those flexible partitions in the room? The reason I ask is it's been brought up by a school committee member in terms of as we move forward and the ability to have more flexible choices or flexible space, as we may need to have a different learning environment. If that, you know, and I guess the question was also raised, are people talking about any of our current situation as it relates to what's being planned or thought about?
You mean for COVID, that kind of piece?
Yes.
So those movable partition walls are still in the project. Right now, we view those as part of the programming. So I don't have those on the table to take off because I think that would change the way that we would be looking at the programming and teaching in the future. Yeah. Again, anything that we put on this list would not affect the educational program or the delivery methods.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think Kathy, there's some conversation, and not just in the education sector, but it's in the commercial real estate sector and everything else, is that what's going to be like post-vaccine? And the question is, will we get back to, you know, instead of trying to anticipate what it might be, whether we're really going to be back to some type of normal relative to the ability to function in a building in terms of that. We don't know, but the question is as we move forward in the design, maybe that will help lay itself out as we go along to determine really kind of how much we do in terms of provide more flexibility than maybe we would otherwise. But I think that's a good point to provide as much flexibility as we can for as long as we can in the design process.
I honestly think that's one of the benefits of the building that we've designed. I think working with the educators, the building that you have coming forward has a lot of flexibility for different ways of teaching. It has a lot of ways of moving those spaces around and teaching in a different format as you progress, not only through a COVID kind of situation, but as you progress through the next 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Okay.
Last item is technology and FF&E, general discussion about budgeting. Obviously, we've previously talked about there's a base allocation. Again, it goes back to what MSBA reimburses, but I think I will quote Mary Piketty, who's the Director of Capital Programs at MSBA, and her comment is always, just because something is reimbursable to the MSBA by the MSBA does not mean that you should be using up to that amount. And just because something is ineligible for reimbursement by the MSBA doesn't mean you shouldn't do something above that if it meets your needs. So I think that really is what it comes down to. You know, this is a lump sum number that they're going to plug in the budget for 440 students. But to really kind of break that down and say, what do you think you need? And some communities will allocate, you know, $3,600 per student. Some will do it at the budget and then figure out where they're going to go as they move along. So I think that's the question, is what do we put in the budget to implement the technology and FF&E needs of the school district as these projects are implemented. So.
So there are a number of considerations that we want to look at. What the what the reimbursable rate is doesn't necessarily mean that we should, if we don't want to open a school without the equipment and furniture and fixtures, that we need to have the students there. The reality is of West Parish was we had a very low actual enrollment number that we were working with for various reasons that we can go back to. But essentially what happened when we were building West Parish was they closed the charter school and they closed St. Anne's all at the same time. And the actual population of that school increased by 30 or so kids. But MSBA stuck with the number that we had originally agreed on, and they're going to stick with the 440 number. Now, that doesn't mean that when we open that school, there's not going to be 460 kids in it. There's enough rooms there for that, without any sort of overcrowding. So, so the question is, do we want to get enough desks for 22 kids per class, or do we want to go with the 440 for the whole school? That's the kind of thing. That's why you might want to increase this number, as well as the technology aspect of everything we're dealing with right now. So I think we just want to open this up for discussion, because I think Brad said at West Parish, we ended up spending more like $3,000 per student. Is that correct?
No, I don't think it was 3,000 maybe when you take in both the FF&E and the technology.
Yeah, that's what I meant, the total.
2,400, yeah.
Instead of the 24, we actually spent.
Yeah, it was.
And by the way, I don't think MSBA has changed that number ever, have they, Brad?
No. So that number's been in place since the inception, and you know, it's not necessarily representative of what we see out there as being typical for schools, particularly when, you know, schools aren't bringing a lot of their, you know, furniture from the previous school back, which is the case that we're talking about here because of this age.
Right.
Yeah. Rich?
Yeah, Jonathan, kind of, you alluded to it just a moment ago. I'm more concerned about the technology situation and what the fallout ultimately is going to be as a result of our current conditions, and the extent to which technology is going to be relied upon 3 years from now. Raising it from the 1,200 per to 1,500, if my arithmetic is correct, is around $132,000 to the budget. So at least in the technology area, I would lobby in favor of increasing the per student allocation.
Amy, you got a lot of old furniture you want to bring over to the new school instead of getting new desks?
Everything at East Gloucester's old.
It's vintage. It's vintage.
It's vintage.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I guess Jonathan brought up a good point about the number of students that you think might be there and how you fit out the building for the, for the anticipated, I'll call it, if there's a bubble there, or it may be a sustained, but, right now the reimbursement's on 440 students, and whether that number, you want to increase the budget for something that you think might occur based upon your growth projections for students, that's another option to take a look at as well.
We know they're finishing, they're working on the 200 apartments, but they're not supposed to really be family necessarily apartments up at Gloucester Crossing. But that's one, I think, unknown. I don't think it's going to be zero students. I would hesitate to outfit every classroom as if it was at full capacity. But it sounds like we should probably have some extra desks and things like that, as you say, as there's a bubble. But I would hate to have all this extra furniture around. I guess my point is, it should be as right-sized as possible to our current, to the projected enrollment on day one, with a little bit of flexibility in case there is a bubble that comes through and some class sizes may be a little bit bigger. That's
So
my.
I do want to mention that if you put it into the budget and you don't use it, if you decide we're not going to buy all of this equipment, or if suddenly there's, the opportunity to get a better deal because you're buying so much and therefore you don't use that money, it's unused. It's not like you have spent it. So just having it in the budget is helpful. As you go forward, you can plan ahead, and then the money comes back to the city if you don't use it.
Rich, good.
Yeah, what I'm about to say should not fall on MSBA's ears, but we had talked about, once the project is completed, the possibility of moving over some students from Beaman. The modulars over there are in relatively dire condition. The facilities may warrant that we move some students around the district, which would include the new East Gloucester Veteran School. Perhaps another reason why a consideration for increasing the furniture component is important as well.
Okay, so just some numbers, and we'll just take the special ed rooms out of it, but there's 24 classrooms and 440 kids. That's assuming about 18 kids in each classroom. If you were to have 20 of an average across the building, that would be 480 students in the building. And that certainly wouldn't be overcrowded by any means.
Michelle, what were the numbers for cubbies? I mean, we came up for like a class size based on, we said like 22 cubbies per room, or
22 for the kindergarten and 24 for each general class.
so could you argue that you need a desk for every cubby?
Well, that would be the maximum capacity.
Right.
That would, so what I'm saying is right now we're functioning on a 18, an average of 18 per classroom across the board. And maybe maybe we're not going to outfit it for 20 and 22. We're going to maybe outfit it for 20 across the board or something, which is going to increase the cost of furniture. That's all. And as Rich said, these days, we're almost in a position we got to provide a Chromebook for every student. So that's another $300 per student. Who knows if that's going to continue, but I may be wrong about this, but the distance learning, even if we go back to normal, is not going to go away. I think that people are learning how to use that effectively, and that it's not going to be it's not going to just disappear completely, even if we do go back to normal. Any other comments on FF&E and technology? Brad, what would you think? What are you seeing as people projecting or budgeting these days? We don't hear you.
You just, you don't-
So we see a lot of people going in at 1,500 today per. We actually had an internal discussion right now based on what we've all been talking about as part of the kind of the user group meetings, and the number right now that we're just generally have been staking out is actually over that number, and that has to do with the types of furniture that we're looking at as part of the flexible learning process, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that we're going to be hard pressed to go and get it into the box at 1,200. And I think as Tom said, if you think about the fact that that number's been sitting there for 10 years at $1,200, just think about what escalation does to that over time.
Yeah. And the other thing that probably needs to be mentioned is that we're going to be buying these things in bulk, and if we get a year down the road and need to buy 6 more desks, they're not going to be as cheap as when we buy them all together, right?
Right.
So are you looking for a specific direction at this point?
I just think before we finalize the overall budget, and again, the good thing about FF&E is was one of the last things that you do after a lot of the risk on the building is done. So depending upon what happens with the construction contingency and the owner's contingency, you may have more flexibility. However, establishing the right budget based upon what you think you may need is important now. Just because if something goes, you can't be robbing the technology and the FF&E budget to not, stock the building properly for education purposes. So it's a balance between that. So, like I said, I think right now, within a week, we're going to have to do that. So I think if people have any other thoughts, Rich made a recommendation to consider 1,500 for technology. And then the question is whether you want to up the pieces of furniture per classroom from 18 to 20 or something. We could do that. So, I mean, just, I guess before we lock that in, we just need to kind of know what the basis of that budget is so we can explain that and justify why that is what the number consists of.
So if we went to 15 and 15, that would raise it 600 times 440, which is $250,000 more or less.
Right. So
on the total budget. Doesn't mean we have to spend it. It doesn't mean that if there isn't money left over and if savings, as Tom said, comes in, these things get bought at the very end. And the hope is that there's money left in the contingencies at the very end and you're not having to spend it. But if there's not money left over in the contingencies and, the last thing when I used to work in construction, did kitchens and, a lot of projects, people were just skimping at the very end because they'd run out of money. And we always used to say, well, I want to be a foundation guy because they always get paid. So, and we don't want that to be the FF&E. I mean, we don't want that to be the desks and the computers and such. So I would think that we don't have to decide. We're going to meet again a week from tonight.
Yeah.
So we can make that decision at that point, but I would recommend that we go with the 15 and the 15.
Okay. We can.
The budget.
Right. So we can prepare the budget based upon that, see where it lands, and then we can have a follow-up conversation if anybody has any further thoughts. So, okay. That's the direction we needed.
Is that John Donna, you raising your hand? I can't see you. You've got like a, or you're just waving.
You're muted, John.
So again, just as we talk about the FF&E and technology, we do have to kind of weigh the fact that, as we talked a little bit about last week in a smaller group, that these things have a obviously much shorter estimated life than the building itself. So, and we do know that whatever we spend on, particularly on technology, so if we spend $1,500 per student on technology, we're probably going to be doing that again in 5 or 6 years. Just a comment.
Jonathan, it looks like Grant has his hand raised.
Right. He does. Grant?
Okay.
Yes, actually, I just wanted to sort of answer John's question where, yes, 5 years. When we specifically look at some of the classroom technology, especially the Chromebooks and the desktops, those are definitely on a 5-year cycle. I know that if we're looking at combining the East Gloucester and Veterans School, that would bring our total carts and capacity for Chromebooks to around 12 carts for the building. And that's based off our current model to support online assessments. Rich, do you know if that's the model that we're going to wind up looking at and changing over the next, couple weeks, sort of anticipation for going back to school, or do we look at expanding that for that model for that building? I'm just a little unsure of how we plan this out in the long term.
Rich, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. There's a plan to conduct MCAS in the fall to make up for lost time, so to speak. And I don't know how that can be administered remotely, quite frankly, and maintain whatever necessary security they have to do. So even in spite of all of the disruption that we're seeing, I think we still need to think in terms of our conventional model, which could involve, we could have half the number of carts in order to administer exams to half the number of kids. But I think that brick and mortar administration of tests and the necessary technology is going to have to be in place.
That makes sense. Thank you.
And we're going to have to hand out Chromebooks. It's going to be a combination.
All I'm going to say is oi.
You forgot the they.
I'm holding judgment for the they.
Okay, well, we can make this decision at our next meeting, correct? And give people a little bit of time to think about it. Okay. But is there anything else that we need to discuss? I do want to, we need to add 2 people to this committee. And one would be a parent from East Gloucester. So Amy, we need to get one, and then we need to get somebody from the construction industry. Rich will be retiring from his superintendency very soon, if not already,
Very nice, Jonathan.
I gotta go, it's nap time.
So he will become our community member because he is investment in the sort of wealth of knowledge that he has, and also the fact that he wrote the most of the educational or coordinated the writing of the educational plan that we are building the school around. So we better keep him around in case we need some answers. And
I was thinking quorum.
although the new superintendent will, by virtue of his office, become a member of the school, of the building committee also.
Jonathan, I'm got some feelers out on a parent.
Okay, good. So we need a construction person as well.
Kathy, you can let me know. I'm more than welcome to reach out to a parent.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
No?
No? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Chris, could we have a roll call vote?
Yes. Jonathan Pope,
Yes.
Richard Sapphire,
Yes.
Jason Rogers,
Yes.
Greg Catamartori,
Yes.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Donna Compton,
Yes.
John Dunn,
Yes.
Gary Frisch,
Yes.
Matt Fusco,
Yes.
Grant Harris,
Yes.
thank you, Joe Lucido,
Yes.
and Amy Pasquarello.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg, for hosting this meeting for us, and
Thank you, Greg.
No problem.
and Grant, and we'll see you all in a week.
Good night.
Good night. This meeting is adjourned.